few years back, I heard the term functional atheism, and the term stuck with me because I could kind of resonate with it. So maybe you're wondering, what's functional atheism? Well, we know what atheism is. Atheism is the disbelief in the existence of God. That is not me. I mean, outside of a few moments of doubt in my life, I have never been, nor do I ever believe that I'll be an atheist. God has shown up in my life so tangibly over the years. I'm a firm believer in the existence of God. So although I will never be an atheist, there have been seasons of my life where I can relate to this term functional atheism. Now, functional atheism is when we behave as if there is no God, even when we believe that God exists. So it would be like I believe that God is in control, but I act like I am in control. So here's an example of what that could look like. I'm facing a hard situation, and so I ask all my friends about what I should do, get their advice. I worry and fret about the situation. I look at it from all angles, and then finally, I make a decision about what I'm going to do based on the advice from others and my own experience. And that seems fine, but it's me acting like God doesn't exist, that God is somehow incapable of intervening or informing the situation. I acted like he doesn't exist because I never talked to or listened to God about what to do. That is functional atheism. We're in this series called Bedrock, Building Confidence in God Block by Block. So someone told me that the blocks in the graphic of this series are like the blocks in the video game Minecraft. Everything I know about Minecraft I learned from a 9-year-old boy named Shepard Davis during one conversation at his house a few years ago. And he was telling me that he had built all these different worlds, and he was telling me all about it. And honestly, a lot of what he was saying was just going straight over my head. This kid is brilliant about something I know nothing about. Well, as followers of Jesus, we're constantly working to build our lives in such a way that we have confidence in God, like building a world that we exist in where we have confidence in God. Not just believing that God exists, but behaving like he exists. So the more we build confidence in God, the less likely we are to behave like functional atheists. We got the idea from this series from Kids City, our kids ministry at Restore. So each week of this series, if you go to our in-person church, you will have your kids in Kids City, and they are going to be looking at the same Old Testament Bible story that we are talking about with the adults. And each week of this series, we're going to take an Old Testament Bible story, and we're going to learn about God and grow in our confidence in him. Now, they will be learning the same story that you're learning, so you can be an expert in the story that your kids are learning about. So you can avoid this moment where they're brilliant about something you know nothing about, because we are going to teach you about it here, and so that you'll know about it when you talk to your kids. So today, our story comes from the book of Daniel. Now, Daniel was living in exile. So God's chosen people, the Israelites, were taken captive by the Babylonians. So Daniel and others were forced to leave Jerusalem and live in Babylon. And the king of Babylon chose young men who were handsome and smart and physically strong to work directly for him. And Daniel fit this description. So he was chosen to be directly in the king's service. Well, Daniel gained so much favor with the king because he's able to interpret dreams. Now, we can't cover all of that, but I would go back to the first few chapters of Daniel, and you should read it because it is fascinating. But we begin our story today of Daniel in Daniel chapter 6, when Darius was the king. Now, Daniel had so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. So here he was, an exile. The king likes him. He's going to set him over the whole kingdom. And this made the other leaders very, very jealous of Daniel. And so they tried to find some fault against him, some way that they could disqualify him for leadership. But they could find nothing against Daniel because he was an upstanding guy. So they decided that they would make up a law that they knew that Daniel could not keep. And so they would do this to get Daniel in trouble because they were so jealous. So they went to the king and they said this: "You should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den." "Now, your majesty," they said to him, "issue the decree and put it into writing so that it cannot be altered. It cannot be repealed." So King Darius put this decree in writing. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. And 3 times a day he got down on his knees and he prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. And then these men went as a group. They found Daniel praying and asking God for help. And so they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. And they said to the king, "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered them, "Yeah, the decree stands and it cannot be repealed." So then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree that you put into writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel, and they threw him into the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought, placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of the nobles so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. And then the king returned to his palace, and he spent the night without eating, without any entertainment. He couldn't even sleep. He was so upset. And at the first light of dawn, the king got up and he hurried to the lion's den. And when he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, who you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" And Daniel answered, and he said, "May the king live forever. My God sent an angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions, and they have not hurt me." Okay. So we read this story, and it's like, what? Daniel was safe? The lions didn't even touch him? Like, what do you think of that? I mean, seriously, what do you think of that? Are you thinking maybe the lions were fed a really big meal that day, so they're not that hungry, and they left Daniel alone? Or maybe Daniel did a really good job of hiding from the lions and keeping super quiet, so they didn't even know he was there. Or maybe the lions were already asleep, and they stayed asleep the whole night. Are you thinking those thoughts? Me too. Always trying to practically explain the miraculous. But even so, even if all those reasons were why the lions left Daniel alone, even so, God was working. So let's pause for a second and imagine how Daniel felt. He knows he's going to the lion's den. He has marched towards the lion's den by the king's guards, and he knows where he's going. Step by step, he recognizes that this could be his very last day alive. And so everything comes acutely into his awareness, like the sounds of the footsteps walking towards the den, the light of the sun setting in the distance. And as they got closer, just the stench of the lion's den. And then he hears the last desperate words of the king who had become a friend. And he hears the king crying out, "May your God rescue you." And then he hears that stone being rolled over the mouth of the den. And that's it. Daniel is alone with the lions. Just him and the lions. But Daniel is not completely alone. And we know that it is Daniel's habit to intentionally get down on his knees 3 times a day, every day, and pray. Daniel talked to God. So I can imagine that the moment that stone was rolled over the opening of the lion's den, shutting Daniel inside, I can imagine that Daniel began to pray, "God, shut the mouths of the lions. God, make the lions not hungry tonight. God, make the lions go to sleep. God, help me hide from the lions. God, protect me. Help me. Be with me. Save me. God, let your will be done. God, I am your servant. I trust you." I'm confident that Daniel did not pray as if he was in control, but Daniel prayed like God was in control. We have the same choice in how we think about our circumstances. Is it all up to us? Or is it all in God's control? I think we build confidence in God when we choose to trust that God is in control and not us. I'm reminded of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, step 1 and step 2. Step 1 is this: we admit that we are powerless. And step 2 is we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us. I think there's likely moments in each of our lives when we come face to face with the reality that we are not in control. There's a health situation, a financial situation, a relationship struggle, a job loss, and we discover that we don't have complete control over our circumstances. And the moment that we admit our own powerlessness is either a moment of devastation or it is a moment of triumph. It is a moment of devastation if we believe that we are completely alone in this world. Every person for themselves. We can't control anything that happens to us. We're coming to that realization. The people we love are awesome, but they are in fact people, and so they let us down. So when we come to this realization that we're ultimately powerless to control all of our life circumstances, and we come to this realization that perhaps we are alone, well, that realization is pretty devastating and hopeless. But if we come to the realization that we are powerless and we believe that we are not alone, that there is a power greater than ourselves who can and will ultimately restore us, then the moment of powerlessness becomes a moment of real triumph in our lives. See, for Daniel, it was a moment of triumph. He had no control over going to that lion's den or what was going to happen in that lion's den. He was facing one of the scariest, overwhelming, out of control moments of his life. But Daniel was not alone. He actually had been training for this 3 times a day, every single day for years. Every single time he fell on his knees in prayer and he acknowledged God, a power greater than himself, would ultimately restore him. Every single time he was trusting God 3 times a day with his life. So when he faces the lion's den, that trust, that hope, that confidence in God, well, it came naturally to him. That moment of fear became a moment of triumph. So for us, whatever our lion's den moment is, a health crisis, financial crisis, a relationship disappointment, God is always with us. And that is kind of the bottom line of this message. See, we can build our confidence in God because he is always with us. I love these words from Deuteronomy. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you. He will never forsake you. So back to Daniel chapter 6, the morning after his night in the lion's den, his words about what happened are this: my God sent his angel and shut the mouths of the lions. You know what Daniel didn't say? He didn't say, I'm so lucky. The lions weren't even hungry last night and they left me alone. He didn't say, I am super smart and so I hid from the lions and they left me alone. He didn't say, how fortunate for me. The lions were asleep when I got there and it was super quiet and I didn't wake them up. He said none of that. Daniel's very first words about what happened was, my God did this. My God. See, all the people let Daniel down. I mean, he was in the lion's den because his coworkers were jealous of him. He was in the lion's den because the foolishness of his leader, the human leader, king, he let Daniel down. But even though nobody had Daniel's back, nobody stood up for him, no person saved the day. Even when he was completely betrayed and alone, Daniel had God. And I love that Daniel referred to him as my God. Not the God, not a God. Daniel said, my God. My God, he is mine and I am his. And that only comes after 3 times a day praying for years. God becomes mine and I become his. And the story continues in verse 23. The king was overjoyed and he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted God. And then, at the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. I almost left that last part out. Like I almost just ended the story with Daniel being okay because I didn't like the next part. It made me feel uncomfortable and weird. It's harsh to read. I mean, children, ugh. But I kept it in. I kept it in because, well, it's in the Bible. And secondly, because if we look at the overarching story of God in the Bible, we can't deny the reality that when we trust God, we ultimately triumph. And when we trust ourselves, when we manipulate circumstances like Daniel's accusers did, when we try to control things for our benefit, not considering the fate of someone else, the consequences of that lifestyle are ultimately and eternally devastating. So I kept that in because I think that's a reality we need to face. We need to face that. I'm reminded of the kids' memory verse for this series, and so maybe it should be ours too. Those who trust in the Lord will receive new strength. They will fly as high as the eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not grow weak. But I recognize that myself and others, maybe we find ourselves in a moment where we're not being rescued from our particular lion's den in this moment. God is not healing the relationship. He is not fixing our finances. He is not restoring our health. But like Daniel, we are not alone. God is with us. And at the end of the lion's den experience, when we are taken out of the pit of this life and we enter into the glory of life with God, I hope that our first words are, my God, you closed the mouth of the evil one. You brought me out of my personal pit into a life of glory and eternity with you. My God shut the mouth of the lions in my life and allowed me to live a life of peace with him. I hope that our lion's den will be our triumph, because we remember that we are not alone, that we choose to trust God who ultimately restores us. You know what's interesting about the end of this chapter, and this is my favorite part of the whole thing, is we look at King Darius's words in verse 26 of the chapter. And okay, just a second, pause here, because King Darius is the one who just had a decree saying everyone should worship me, nobody else but me. And then he watches Daniel's miraculous lion den moment where God rescued him, and it changes his mind. And now King Darius is suddenly telling everyone they should worship the God of Daniel. And this is King Darius's words about Daniel's God. For he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So I hope that as we trust God in our lives, in the middle of our lion's den moments, that others will see our faith. And like King Darius, they will be so inspired that they will say that about our God. Let's pray. God, we just thank you that you can show up for us in that way. And if we're living in the pit right now and we feel like we're being torn limb from limb, that we would know that you are our ultimate rescuer, that you rescue us out of the lion's mouth, out of the clutches of the evil one who seeks to destroy us, and that ultimately we will triumph in eternity with you because you are our God. Thank you so much for that hope and that security that we have because of your Son, Jesus. We pray this in his name. Amen. Now, earlier you would have gotten elements for the communion, so we just encourage you to go ahead and take communion right now as a reminder right here, wherever you are, that God is with you and that he is for you.